Prelude, A Flower in Time. Finally, the awaited night had arrived. Picking up the flowing hem of her gown, a beautiful figure stepped out into the forest clearing. She looked about her with a strange, excited expression and then hurried towards the summit, where a small, simple headstone was. The moon shone down upon her white, lacy attire and made her look almost regal, an ephemeral queen from an age long ago. It was her night. She knelt down by the headstone and ran a gentle hand along it. "I am sorry, my love. Sorry I could not come sooner," she said in a faint, forlorn whisper. She looked about her, almost as if to make sure no one listened, for this was their private, appointed hour and must not be intruded upon. Never that. She knelt forwards on the soft ground and wrapped her delicate arms around the weather-worn headstone and laid her cheek upon it. Closeness. "Oh, how I have missed you, my love. Have you missed me? So much was taken from us that night, so much lost, and all of it unfair," she said, her words coming out eagerly. Her patience expired. The lady frowned. It was all so unfair. They had been so much in love, and no one had cared, no one had helped, or even stirred from their hopeless reveries. "Do you remember how we met? Do you remember that day, my love?" She smiled radiantly at the thought of the happy memory, for memories was all she had now. "And it was on that first night that I knew we were destined to be together, that we belonged." She shook her head ruefully and gently placed a flower on the grave. Carefully grown and nurtured for a year, and then its head snipped off in the prime of its life, one single copper lotus bloomed from the waters of the soul-swept lake. Though they all said it would never work, that our love was not to be, could not be allowed. She paused, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. But I guess that has always been the way of the world. For her allotted hour, the sad form sat cross-legged by the grave of the one she loved, and told him small things from their past, shared her precious memories, and found some peace, found renewed absolution. The moon finally descended over the tree line, and the clearing became a place of shadow once more. Realizing her time was nearly up, her tears fell, and she spoke in hurried, hushed whispers of her sadness, told him that her love was unchanged, and he filled her heart as ever and forever, for they were bound. But it was all so confusing. Dissipation. Knowing her time was up, she sighed and stood up, looked down upon her lover's simple grave. It seemed so small and insignificant, somehow starkly alone and wrong. "Goodbye, my love, until our next time." She stood silently looking down at the ground for a long while. She reluctantly left the clearing the way she had come, walking backwards so that she could look upon her lover's grave those few seconds longer. But then, having reached the clearing's edge, she turned and disappeared silently back into the forest night. Darkness came and spread its desolation, lifeless and still. Not even the wind moved here. Under the rich earth, within his tomb, High Priest Uldrath IV rested not in peace, for he had been cursed to lie eternally, neither dying nor living, sealed within a small chamber in which he could only lie on his back and watch blackness, he suffered greatly. It was a strange, tormented existence, to lie sentient and unmoving, sealed supine for centuries, only allowed to occasionally sleep and dream, but always to once more awaken into an unimaginable, perpetual nightmare where time lost all meaning and suffering had surpassed all known bounds, where insanity was denied. Even his dreams had become bland. Once a year, his love, Lady Mavaressa, came to visit him. Hers was a tale of sorrow. She had been pure and divine in life. She had died alone and sad all those years ago, and was now destined to wander in a limbo world as a spirit, a ghostly form that did not know it was dead. His love for her had faded years ago. Sympathy had become annoyance, and then nothing. There was nothing left to think about, so he simply did not. Thoughts had ceased their idle coming. Sensation was minimal. He could fake non-being and had become good at such. All was still and silent. But then his mind drifted onto something the ghost had said. "You promised you would return? When, my love? When?" What had it meant or referred to? He did not expect an answer. "It is time, Aldraf." The faintest of voices echoed from somewhere inside of him. Now his own mind played tricks on him, he concluded. "No, priest, listen." Where had he heard that voice before? There was some most ancient of memory, buried in a place deeper than even he was. It was trying to surface. This was new. Or was it the beginnings of what he had long hoped for? His insanity. He began to worry that madness would be even worse. "Listen to what?" he eventually, obligingly replied. "To your soul," the voice said almost inaudibly, fading out and then vanishing. He then heard something, the only sound he had once longed for with great passion, a scraping sound from above, digging. There were intermittent growls and grunts as some leviathan from above dug him up. Great clawed limbs were gouging, pulling, and breaking the land above. Enraged snarls broke into eager whines, rending of root and smashing of stone. Then it stopped. Silence. Aldraf lay there in disbelief. He had been on the verge of hope. It had seemed real. He went back to his previous conclusion. Madness. But then suddenly, a great smashing sound beat down on the stone above him. He jumped. The stone ceiling of his tomb was instantly split asunder in one mighty strike. The two slabs of rock above him were then violently pulled open and discarded to the sides. Aldraf peered up at a great demonic face, a bulbous beast of legend. It was the Lakharak. It paused and stared down at him. For a heartbeat, two flaming, evil eyes of pure hatred glared deeply into his very being, and then, its task complete, it simply vanished. Scared beyond anything he had known in a long age, Aldraf lay there frozen in his open sepulchre, watching the night sky above him. he could see the stars. He was breathing. Long forgotten power began to soar into him, began to grow from within. They collided and became as one. Finally, movement. He stood up and got out of his grave, a tall, formidable figure, his regal priestly robes still fine and non-decayed. Now, at last, he did remember. He was Aldrath, High Ruler, and the promise of his god of lichdom was his. But it had been hard, and the suffering had been even greater than foreordained. His eyes narrowed, his mind was fully awake again. His god remembered. Glaring at the place where the ghost had slipped away at the edge of the forest clearing, the Lich King, Aldrath, turned and went the other way, went into the night. He was the night, and the dark would now return with a vengeance unheard of.